Hello everyone, this is Billy Cultist, and today I'm going to be presenting Dream Model Spectacular to you today instead of Jimmy. We figured that you might enjoy this because he's releasing an informative but very brief video dealing with how to archive in Dreams, so we figured maybe you might want something a little more to sink your teeth into as well, so here I am today. What we're going to be doing, basically, is making an environment. I'm going to be making it from scratch, so no pre-made assets. And we're going to do a kind of a wintry forest, maybe a fantasy forest. The line between those is, especially for me, sometimes very blurred. But anyway, it will be at least a wintry forest. And we're going to try to make it look pretty good and do it pretty quick. There's going to be a lot of editing and definitely some time-lapse involved, but I'll do my best to explain exactly what I'm doing as I go. Before we get right into it, another thing I want to note is that nothing in this video is necessarily a hard and fast rule. This is more of a demonstration than a hardcore tutorial, so to speak. There may be many ways of approaching this kind of thing. I'm just going to show you how I do it, and maybe it will help you out. Maybe it will just be enjoyable to watch. Either way, we're going to get into it. The first thing I'd like to do is open up our modes. No, not our modes. Go to our gadgets. Gameplay gear. And get Blank Puppet Deluxe. I do this for size and scaling. We'll probably delete him later, but for the beginning part, we're going to have him out. Okay, so the second thing we're going to do is we're going to start actually sculpting the environment that you're going to be walking on. I'm going to get into the sculpt mode. And we're going to, since it's winter and there's snow, we're going to choose white for our basic color for our sculpting brush. I'm actually going to use a square, just as kind of a demonstration that you don't have to use special fancy shapes for this. I like to turn on this varying looseness right here, because this helps with optimization to some degree, and it just kind of looks neat to me. You can find out more about that. But anyway, I'll cut that on, and we're going to start sculpting out a little kind of node in the woods, which is going to be like a clearing or something. Something you'll notice I did really quick is I'm kind of putting a defined edge around our little clearing, and that's just because we're going to approach this in such a way as it's almost like you're making an interior of a building. Think that way when you're building an environment seen in Dreams. I like to do that sometimes. It makes it easier generally speaking. I like to think of exterior scenes, like in environments, in nature, as if they were simply corridors and rooms decorated in such a way and designed in such a way that they look natural, like you're out in nature. But in terms of game design, that's kind of what they are, really. They're rooms, unless you're in some kind of massive open world type deal like Red Dead, where they're more like real, but we're not doing that today. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm adding a pair of little, like, entryways to our node in the woods, which will connect to another path module that I'm going to build right after this. Okay, so sculpture-wise, I've got this little clearing just about where I'd like it to be. I'm going to go into its internal settings by hitting L1 square to bring up its tweak menu, and I'm going to tweak a few things to my liking to where I think they need to be. This is probably something that's going to go for most of the items I create in this scene. I'm going to go for physical properties, and for this one I do want it to be collidable, and I don't need imp interaction, so I'm going to turn that off. And I don't think that the physics cost needs to be super high. I don't think it's going to be a huge problem with colliding with this massive object, so I'm going to turn that down low. Another thing I'm going to do in here is I'm going to turn off the luminoids, which is a new option they recently added in an update to Dreams, and I like it a lot. One thing to remember when you do this, to get a better effect with it, you can simply click off the button, But go in here to the inner properties and turn this color amount from 30% to 0. I find that improves it quite a bit, but it's really up to you. Now I'm going to do some spray paint detailing on this sculpt, and some other detailing involving paint, but first we'll go for the spray paint. We're going to hit up a nice, kind of a dark, deep, muddy brown color, because I'm going to put some areas where I think like the mud is showing through. The ground has been disturbed. I like to set surface snap on when I'm doing this kind of spray painting stuff. I'm going to go back and do a little negative work with the opposite color, the white. Okay, the painting's done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into my modes, and I'm going to quickly go to style mode, and this is just an artistic choice, but what I want is something in flex a little more snow-like, personally, so I'm going to go with dots this time. I'm just going to apply that to all the flex on this. The final thing I'm going to want to do is a little bit of paint mode detailing. So I'm going to open up paint mode, and I'm going to get in here, and I'm going to take and get exactly the color of the mud first, and set my paint to snap to surface. Going to get the same kind of flex we used in style mode on the sculpt. Going to go back, make sure I'm on brush, and then I'm going to do some paint detailing and drag some wet mud around, and we're going to turn up the gloss later. Okay, as I said before, now I'm going to enter into coat mode, and I'm going to go to my finishes, and we're already on a shiny one, which is exactly what I wanted. So now I'm going to get my painting, and apply that shiny coat to this painting. That way we get some nice kind of wet earth specular effect there, like wet mud popping through the snow. Now, I'm going to go back in and start painting again, add some extra snow detail, and maybe a bit of reddish brown, maybe some fallen leaves popping through here or there, something like that you might see in the forest. Okay, major update. I actually just made a major mistake, and I separated these paintings because I was figuring on one being shiny and one not. But I believe, if I'm correct, it's actually possible in Dreams to have a painting with two different types of fleck, with two different types of coat, simultaneously in the same painting. So I don't need to actually start a separate painting for this. I just need to make sure that I change the coat within the paint mode instead of using coat mode. So I'm going to cut to when I'm all done with that, and I've got this painted. The process of painting will be much the same as what you've seen prior. Okay, we've finished adding some more of that paint detailing in it, and I think it's in a good place where I like it. I'm satisfied with it. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to move on to sculpting pathway nodes that we can hook up to these nodes and create the basic groundwork of actually what we'll be walking on in our scene. Alright, so what we're going to do is get into sculpt mode and begin making our pathway nodes. Using white again as the base, I'm going to go ahead and use varying looseness and use much the same shape as we used to work on the other element. I'm also going to remember to turn off surface snap. This is going to be fairly quick. We're going to use these entryways as a guide for just exactly how wide our path should be at each end. And I'd say that's about a good place for my path. Now that I've finished sculpting the path, I'm going to go through pretty much the exact same steps I went through with this sculpt as well, which is turning off luminoids, tweaking the internal physics, and then doing some detailed painting work with both paint mode and the actual spray paint mode. We're going to speed through that and then move on to the next step. Okay, so our path's looking like it's in a good position to be, just about as good as the other thing, which is what I want. I have noticed, though, there's a little hole in here, so I'm going to go in real quick and clear that out. Okay, so now that we got our path and our little forest clearing modules complete, what I'm going to do is actually start setting up the scene's general layout using just these two. We're going to speed through that as I decide what I want. You'll notice how I built these. These have two paths, one entering, one exiting, and I can basically duplicate them out along however I want, and I can duplicate this as well, and just connect them, kind of like a Lego set or something. But it makes it easy, and you know, sculpts duplicated out do not infringe on your graphics cost, so it's an economical way of doing it. I think we'll go for about 3 of these little clearings in our scene total. It's not going to be a huge scene. I may duplicate this path out a couple more times in some interesting ways, but we will continue to do that quickly until I get to the end. Something I think we should note at this point is that when I duplicate this paint, which is for detailing on this sculpt, this goes for the path as well, and the sculpt itself, I'm actually selecting the paint and selecting the sculpt, and I have not grouped them. The reason why is because I intend to try to merge all this paint after everything is constructed, and I think that will save cost, because it will all be one painting, and it's not that detailed, so it won't be that crazy. Okay, now we have our nice little meandering path through the forest. And at this point, I'm gonna go through and try to select all these paintings and group them all together, or not group, but merge, in order to create one giant painting. Alright, so that's done. I discovered along the way that end result was too complex to merge all of them together. I was able to merge 6 of them, and 2 on the end had to be merged together, but we have reduced the number of paintings from 8, I think, to 2. So that's nice. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is fairly simple. I'm going to create a very basic rudimentary sculpt that's going to act as kind of a buffer between the farthest visual boundaries of our scene and our actually traversable area of our scene. It's going to be a simple, just sort of snowy lump. So I'm going to speed through that. Something to note, with the snowy lump, we are not going to be walking on it at all, so I'm going to completely turn off the collidability. Now I'm going to duplicate out my snowy lump and get it situated as a kind of a nice buffer zone, as I said before, between our traversable area and our most distant visual border. Alright, I've got the border all along here, as you can see, all set up, exactly like I think I want it. Now, when we're traversing this scene in-game, I intend that we're not really going to go beyond this area here, so that's decent enough visual distance border, especially if you're in a thick forest, which is what we're going to be, and that will work for now. Okay, so the next thing we're actually going to do is going to go about actually making some trees. I intend to make about 3 different types of tree to give us forest a nice little kind of a variation in its look. We're going to make a small sapling, a medium-ish kind of small tree, and then our big, large trees, which are going to be the impressive trees in our forest. We'll start with our largest tree by getting into sculpt mode. I like to use the curve tool, and I like to set it on smear, L1 triangle simultaneously to change that setting. We're going to choose a nice kind of grayish brown for the bark. Actually, I may work negatively and kind of go with a snowy look and painted bark areas later, but we'll find out about that. Okay, and our tree, I'm going to definitely get into settings and do my old thing of varying the looseness, which I like to do quite often. And another thing I'm going to do with our tree is I'm going to draw just kind of the trunk to about so high above where our head will be, and this will be explained later. But anyway, let's get going. I'm going to speed through most of this. Okay, so there's our base tree sculpt right there. And now that I've got that in, that's pretty much what I wanted to make sure of as far as size was concerned. I may scale it up just a touch without losing too much detail, but that's about how big I want the tree next to our player. So at this point, I'm going to actually delete the puppet for guidance, and we can just go on without it. Get a better thermal reading here. We've got 10, 11, that's about right. I may reduce the detail on this just a touch, wouldn't hurt. So I'm going to quickly get in and do that with reducing the detail. Just a touch. It's very red. I don't think we need that much detail on it. Bring it down a bit. I like to usually bring it into kind of a purple zone. It's about enough, especially with a natural object. We don't really need super sharp clarity, at least I don't. That's a good spot to be in. I think that'll be acceptable. Now you may be thinking this is not a very tall tree, and you'd be right. And it looks a lot like just a tree stump or a tree that cracked off about so far up. And that's exactly what I'm thinking, though. I want to take our small tree and I'm going to build it in such a way that if we want, we can actually staple our small tree's root right onto that and make a full tree and have a lot of nice detail down here because a small sculpt can retain that detail. if I did this all the way up, we wouldn't get as much good detail on the tree as we got here. And it's just more economical. Now I'm going to go ahead with some detailing on the tree, much like I did with these other sculpts, using the spray paint and possibly even some paint flecks. So I'm going to speed through that. We're going to choose a kind of a dark brown gray to be this tree's actual bark color, and I'm going to be working negatively. So instead of painting the snow onto the tree as brown, I'm going to paint the spots in the snow onto the tree. Okay, that gives us kind of a nice frosty look. Now I was considering whether I wanted to actually go through and put actual paint on there, and I may just put a bit of paint, like snow paint flecks on there just to make it interesting. And bring out detail a little bit more at low cost. We'll go do that real quick. Okay, and I think that's about as much as I want for that. I think we'll be fine with that. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and get in here real quick and turn off the luminoids. I don't think we need that on. And then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start sculpting our next tree. We're going to have to be a little bit careful about that. I may want to go ahead and just do a little bit of extra work here on this top part. It may need a little more detailing with spray paint, but then we'll go ahead and move on into sculpting our small tree. Okay, we're going to start with our small tree, and the interesting part about this is we're going to have to try to make it fit color-wise with this up here. So it's going to have to start kind of around this color. That's going to be interesting. Alright, we've got the rudiments of our small tree, so now I'm just going to go in and do with it what I did with this, except maybe a little less detail, but mainly sculpting, spray painting. I may entirely skip the paint flecks on the small tree. Okay, we got that. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and right into the spray painting, and we're gonna try to clear that up fast. Okay, something else I want to do with our small tree, like I said before, I want to come down here and kind of try to figure out a way to make this mesh up better with color, so we're going to go do a little more spray painting on our big tree. Okay, that's looking pretty good to me. I think that meshes up nicely. So we've got our smaller tree. I need to add some branches up at the top. A little branching out wouldn't hurt anything. Okay, I think our branches for our small tree are at a place where I'm comfortable with. You may notice, of course, that we don't exactly have as many branches on this tree as you might expect on an actual tree, but really it's about the implication of that detail and not the actual detail. We can't necessarily handle all that, graphically speaking, although there are certain ways you might get away with it. But we're just going to go with this kind of simplistic approach. It gets us across the idea of a tree nicely enough. Okay, now that we got our small tree, I'm actually going to leave this one on top just for convenience sake, so we don't need to line these up again. Later, when we want to make full trees, I'm going to duplicate out one of them and leave it down to the side, so that could be our small tree use. I may go in here and actually go ahead and do a little painting detail of the small tree chunk as well, with the actual paint flicks. Alright, we've got our little details on the small tree. Now, you may be inclined or disinclined to think that you need a little more detail or maybe a little less than what I've put. It's an artistic choice. You gotta decide what you like, and also you gotta balance that with cost of thermo and cost of gameplay and all that other stuff going on. But basically, using paint flicks in this way can help you if you want to get away with kind of more implication of detail without actually having three-dimensional detail. It's kind of a throwback to the tricks used in older video games, back when developers had to rely more heavily on texturing because they couldn't actually have all the polygons that are available to people now. A little nice 2D texturing can actually go a long way for making something look more detailed, even though it doesn't actually have polygonal detail or 3D detail. Okay, so we've got our large tree and we've got our small tree. Now I'm going to move on to our tiny tree, or our sapling, which will probably be a pretty simple sculpt, and I won't probably use a ton of detailing on it for sure. Okay, we've got our sapling. And yeah, it's pretty much like I want it. I don't think I need to do a lot of detailing. I may do a slight bit of spray painting down here and darken it at the stump, but we're going to go in and do that and fix up its tweaks. Okay, we've got our sapling. I think it's all ready to go, no problem. Now, last but not least, one thing I definitely want to make sure I get is a kind of accessory branch, and this will come in handy later, which you'll see. So I'm going to sculpt that quick. It's going to be about the same as a sapling, in some ways. Okay, so that's our accessory branch. We could actually use the sapling in that manner too, except I wanted one of a different kind of shape for a specific kind of purpose. And what we'll do with this is we'll use this for some excess detail around our forest later. Something of note I've done with both the sapling and the accessory branch, they do not have collidability on. They're completely non-collidable, which I don't really think we need them collidable for the purposes of this. But anyway. Okay, we've got some basic props which will come in very useful in building this scene and decorating it out. But what we need to now is deal more damage to the actual work of putting out the basic format of the scene in general. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start building a actual wall of trees. And these are going to be kind of low-def, low-detail trees in the background. And I'm going to get to work on that. It's going to be fast. It's going to be much like building the sapling. Not like these highly detailed trees, but we'll see what they're used for when I'm finished. Okay, and we've completed our wall of trees. All tweaks have been tweaked. It's not collidable, of course. It will not be something that's traversable or touchable by the player. And I've done a little detailing, such as it is, but it doesn't really need to be that detailed because that's not its purpose. Its purpose is mostly as background filler. What I'm going to do is take this wall of trees, and we're going to run it all along our furthermost border, along our thick forest path. We might even double up and do 2 layers to make it even better effect. But we're going to do that. We're going to run that all along, and I'm going to do that real quick now. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to double up and do a second layer. The second layer, what I'm going to do is actually make them slightly shorter than the first. But we're going to go around the same way we did on the outside of this layer. Okay, I've got a nice double layer of those background trees all along the border there, and something I want to do finally is take these globules and kind of use them again to kind of go along that background. I'm going to make them quite large because they don't need to be high def either out there, but we're going to kind of create a sort of nice bordering that goes off into the woods. So I'm going to speed through that. Okay, we've got that set up, and that looks acceptable to me. It'll probably work out nice. Now what I want to do is actually go into lighting. Some people recommend you do this at the very beginning. It's probably a good recommendation. We didn't do it on this one, but we're going to fix it now. I'm going to actually go ahead, get into my gadgets, go straight to the canvas and lighting, get us a sun and sky for our scene, and set that up. Now I'm opening up our sun and sky settings, and I want to kind of dim overcast day, so actually I'm going to turn the sun. I may in fact just turn the sun completely off for that. We don't really want sunlight so much as we want ambient light from the surrounding environment. We're going to be fairly, not too dark, but we're going to choose a sky image that will suit our needs. Okay, and I've got a sky image that I think works pretty well, number 7 here, and I'm going to change the flick type to a nice, like those. It's good brightness. I'm going to desaturate the sky because I want to kind of have my own color control over it. We're going to put a hint of blue in there, but not too much. I still like that gray, wintry kind of... We might turn up the intensity of our color just a touch there, but we don't want to lose the actual sky values that we got going on. I'm going to reduce the fleck shade randomness quite a bit because I don't really care for that. And since it's a thick forest, I tend to like to do a thing with the fog range where I bring it down to around 300 usually. Yeah, kind of make it look a little more misty, hazy, and deep. Okay, that's all done and our sky is in place. So what we want to do now is we're going to start actually decorating along this with our trees as they are. And basically what I'm going to do that is select them as I want them. And if I want, say, this tree and this tree, I'm going to select... I probably won't... don't know that I'll group that. I might group that. But what I'll do is, definitely I won't group the paintings, because I may do the same thing with the paintings on these trees as I did with the paintings along the ground, join up a bunch of them to make less paintings in the scene generally. Don't know how many I'll be able to do that with, but anyway, it reduces the number of paintings. So now I'm just going to start duplicating out our big tree. Okay, now I've duplicated out our large tree to a massive extent, and I'm pretty glad with what I've got. Now, as you'll notice here, our gameplay thermo has gone up by about 1 or a couple % because of all those clones. They will raise gameplay as you make more and more of them, and there's actually even more. There's double the number of clones because, as you remember from the first part, our big tree is actually 2 trees stapled together for extra detail's sake. But a little rise in gameplay like that is not going to be a problem at all. Look at all this we got, and we don't have a huge scene here, so, you know, it's going pretty well. Graphics is still stable at 12. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make the magic happen, so to speak, and we're going to get the bottom of one of these trees, with the paint attached to it, and we're going to dupe that out a bit, and have some kind of stumps to make it look more foresty. Sometimes there's those cracked trees laid around in the forest. We're going to speed through that. There shouldn't be as many as the big trees. Okay, we've got some stumps put out in the forest, and now what I'm going to do is kind of take our little tree, which I actually put over here. I don't want to take it off. I could take it off the top, doesn't matter. I'm gonna select that. We're gonna go through and kind of sprinkle some little trees around. Okay, we've put some little trees here and there. It makes our forest look even better, but now let's get to the saplings. Those will improve the definition and look even better, so let's start that. Okay, we've got saplings in a position where I'm comfortable with them. We could add more or less. That goes for just about any one of these sculpts, but I'm comfortable with them for now. What I'm going to do last and not least is take this accessory branch and kind of stick it in some places of interest to kind of spruce up our forest yet even more. I'll speed through that. Okay, I think we've done a good job with our accessory branches. Again, you could add more or less, but, you know, that's artistic. I think we're in a good place for now with that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to head through and I'm going to put some interesting spotlights along our trail to kind of draw our eye and make things just pop out a little more. I'm going to speed up as I do that. I've opened up my spotlight settings, and I'm actually going to talk about this just for a second. I'm going to dim this down a little bit. Spotlights are very impressive for making a scene really pop in a certain way. The lighting is just super impressive once you get that going. And we're going to just use some simple spotlights. I'm going to put one at basically each of these forest's path nodes that we have, and I may change the color slightly a bit between them, but not very much. Like the next one I may go for kind of an off-white bluish color, but not much of a change. Anyway, I'm going to continue to do that. Okay, we've got our spotlight set up, and these two nodes on the ends, I've kind of narrowed the beam considerably from the one in the center, draw more attention towards the center, and I've also made them a kind of a off-white bluey color, but they're very interesting and nice. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm planning to cap off these ends, so to speak, here, where we exit and enter, or vice versa, the scene, just to make them look better if you're there inside the scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly do that by just dressing them up a little bit, maybe duplicating out some of these and bringing them along the side, making it appear as if the road doesn't just terminate into a sheer drop into nothingness, but goes off deeper into the woods. So I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, we've got our roads set up in such a way that they no longer look like they just drop off into the abyss. They kind of look like they might be the road kind of trails along out there into the woods. It might maybe be better, but for our purposes, I think it's fine. Thinking of how I'm thinking this game will be played, you would actually enter the zone to load into a new area right about here. So you wouldn't proceed down this path any further than here. This is about what you'd be able to see and no further. So from there it looks pretty decent. And the same can be said of the other road. One last thing I would do to make these terminuses look a little neater and kind of help maybe with the gameplay is to add a fog to each end, which will in some respect draw your eye and kind of give you an impression that might be where the exit is in some way. It's going to be very subtle, but it'll be nice looking. We'll create a kind of glowing fog, we'll set it up in such a way that it's behind the trees, and it gives us a kind of light coming through the woods in that area, which will cue your mind that maybe that's the way you want to go. Okay, we got our little light terminuses set up, but that's not very nice. We'll look at that later. But right now I want to do something else and kind of thicken up the background just a bit in a very cheap way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out my paint fleck tool, and I'm going to probably use these hatching, and we're going to get kind of a color roughly about what our trees would be, maybe a little bit lighter since these are going to be somewhat in the background. Make sure this is on stamp, I will. And definitely take off surface snap. But I'm going to basically be taking these and running this along the outside to create yet another elusive layer of more distant trees with even less definition basically out here so that we can get a visual look that we like. And I'm just going to run that all along real quick and then we'll get back to it. Okay, we've added those in all the way around, and as you can see, that's added a little bit more artistic vagary in the background, trick the eye, make her think you're deeper in the woods than you really are. And now what I really want to do is something that's important to gameplay that sometimes can be easily forgotten, is make the invisible walls. This is usually very simple. I'll just get into sculpt mode, make sort of a flattened square shape, put on my varying looseness. Make it, well, I won't scale it up there, just stamp one out, very simple, get out of sculpt mode, scale it up to a nice large size, something that no one would be able to probably jump over that I'd put in here, and then I'll go through and make sure that it can be collidable. We will turn off input interaction and we will turn down the physics cost because I don't think it needs to be that high, and we will make sure and we go through and have it cast no shadows. And go back to our physics and invisible. That's perfect. Now what we'll want to do while we're working with it is go into our tools and, or no, I'm sorry. We'll want to turn on this in our eye, preview invisibility, so that we can see it while we work with it. We want to remember to come back to our eye and turn this off when we're done with the invisible wall. What I'm going to do though is reduce the detail on this invisible wall because it doesn't need to be that high at all. We don't want it taking up thermo for what it is. It's not going to be visible at all. That's pretty good. And we'll take it and we'll just clone it out all along the outside of our traversable zone in the scene, making a wall. And I'm going to speed through that until we have it done. Okay, we finished up our invisible wall, and we're at one of the far exits to our scene. And you may notice I kind of made a mistake and put a little extra invisible wall, which I will delete right now, going off along the exit road. And the reason that's a mistake is because in the game our player would never get to go down there physically. We would have some kind of zone set up here with, a door or exit way triggering it, which would exit you from the scene before you had the ability to walk that far out there. So really we only need our invisible wall along those, and it can terminate at the doorways as seen. Now that we have our invisible wall finished, and there could be debate about how well it was set up, I did go kind of fast on it. There could be tweaking and surface adjusting, and certain things might need to be looked at. Maybe there's some cracks somewhere, but it's good for now. What I'm interested in doing now is adding a few very basic finishing touches, and then we'll actually add a puppet into the scene and inspect from a puppet eye view, as it were. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn visibility back to normal in the eye area, so that we can see things as they should be to a player. And I'm going to actually add some quick paint fleck falling snow, very gently falling snow. This should be nice and quick. Now I'm in my paint fleck mode, and I've got my thing set to normal brush. I've got no surface snap on, and I've got light. And I'm just going to quickly, for our falling snow, draw out some really long lines, kind of wisping down from about this height into our trees. Okay, we've got our nice wisps of snow. I'm going to do some internal tweaks on this paint. There's other ways to do this, but I'm going to actually do it this way. We're going to mess with the flex ruffle. I'm going to turn that way up. And I'm going to turn the impasto to 0. I'm going to go through and take to this duplicates or cloning menu that they have here. Actually, wait, before that, I'm going to head to this animation area, and we're going to set a speed for our falling snow. It's probably going to be somewhere around 300, 200, I think. Let's test it and see how fast that's going. It's a little fast. We'll turn it on pulse to get a better idea of how it really will look. And make sure to turn the trail length down, because we don't want our snow really have too much trail. I'll put it on 0. That's a decent type of... That's a decent speed. I may actually reduce it just a touch. I want to be very gentle. Okay, now that we have our stills animation settings in a place where I like them, we're going to move to our cloning area and set this to around camera. And I might increase the number of copies quite a bit. It's at 20% currently. I'm going to reverse and play and see what things look like. So, we have some very gentle falling snow, and I think I do like it. I think I do like the effect as it is. I might change the actual coat of the paint flecks to wax. Shiny wax, in fact. This allows our snow to be a little more visible in this woods. We don't necessarily need the snowflakes casting shadows or having shadows. But that looks very nice. I like that kind of calm winter, gentle snow, not too thick. Now that we've got our snow, we're going to do one final touch that I think I want to do just before we preview it with a puppet and probably wrap things up. I'm going to take one more fog layer, expand this just a bit so it's easy to get to the gadget, probably move it, well, we'll have it above, and then I'm going to set it to a square, and I'm going to take this square slab of fog and kind of draw it out underneath the map, and we're going to get a kind of a low-lying hanging layer of not too dense fog to kind of make this forest look even more chilly and mysterious. On my fog, I'm going to set my zone to very, very thin along the y-axis, and I'm going to have a very high y fall off, because I want my fog to have a nice taper up into the atmosphere of the forest. We're going to move it down and put it, as I said, just about level, a little bit under maybe, about there. And we're going to have it run along this entire path, and luckily this path is a roughly rectangular shape, so we don't have too much problem with that. Now we're going to expand the fog along the X and Z axis alone, till it covers the entire floor of our zone. That's pretty good, that does it. And we're going to now go in and take a look at what we got with this. It might be a little too thick at this point, and it's definitely the wrong color. I'm going to turn it to a white color. We're going to reduce the density by quite a bit, maybe down to around 4. I'll turn up the glow just a touch, because it won't be nicely visible. Around 8 looks good. 6. I'll leave it at 6. We'll also move this color over here to the maybe a little bit of blue in there. Just a touch. And there, we've got kind of a nice fog. Now this, of course, might not be to your liking, but I kind of prefer it for a forest, especially one that's supposed to have a hint of magic about it or something. And in the cold, you know, it just seems right. Well, now we've actually reached the point where I think I'm ready to do a quick preview run through this entire area with an actual puppet in possession. And I think what better puppet to add into this than Jimmy's recently created goblin, since this is supposed to be a magical wintry forest after all. We'll have a run through with our goblin. I'm gonna cut out and we're gonna take him into the scene, do a little adjusting on him, and get him ready for a run. Okay, I've brought in Jimmy's goblin into the scene. He's in a place where I would expect to maybe spawn into this scene if I was entering this part of the forest for the first time ever in the game, or returning to it down a certain path. I have done a little adjusting. There were a few lights that needed to be deleted from inside his group, but that's all been taken care of. I have also reduced his run speed just a bit. I usually like my run speed at around 3. Run speed tends to be a little too fast on puppets in general, but that's my taste. Anyway, we're going to take him on a quick fling and run through the woods. So we're going to enter play mode. Oops, looks like I forgot to get rid of one of his extra spotlights. That'll happen to you. I must not have been as thorough as I thought, so we're going to go back. Okay, we got rid of that spotlight problem. Goblin is in sync with the lighting, and testing our invisible walls just a bit here. They seem to be working okay. And we can kind of take a little jaunt through our woods along our wintry path. It's looking very nice to me. I really like the atmosphere. I really like the lighting. It's just looking so chill and wintry. Perfect. Oh, I like it. There's a lot we could have done in this map. We could have added quite a few more details, actually. We certainly, I think, have the room on our thermo, and we could probably handle it. But for the sake of brevity in the video, I have decided to not do that on this particular deal. We might, if you really enjoyed this, go ahead and return to this in a second video where I do a little more detailing. Maybe add some focal points, things of interest, maybe add some kind of goblin house or town or something like that in here. Make it a little more interesting, add even more detail to the forest floor, which could be done. But that's if you really express an interest in it. Additionally, I genuinely, would like to come back and maybe make more environmental scenes, maybe based on suggestions from you people in the audience. I would warn you, though, if you're going to suggest something, don't try to suggest copyrighted material to me. I will not do any copyrighted material, so don't be telling me, make the Beauty and the Beast castle, or make the Terminator whatever alleyway, I don't know, something like that. You could say, make something like this, but don't tell me just to make a duplicate of whatever it is you're a fan of, or I'm a fan of. I will make interesting things, though, if given the suggestion. I think I would enjoy that quite a bit, and there'd probably be some challenges involved, but it'd be interesting to try to surmount them. Anyway, this is looking very nice. I like it. There's one last thing I may do, however, in the puppet settings. Okay, I'm going to get my puppet logic very quick, and I'm going to go into my controller logic. This is something I personally like to do. Some people may not think it's necessary or even like it. I like to get my controller sensor, and visually I just kind of tend to like the way it looks when you get a little background blur going on. Usually for me it's around 60% on this aperture setting in the puppet's controller sensor camera settings area. But we're going to go back and do one last run with him with that setting on. See how it looks. Okay, we're back at the beginning of our forest, and as you can see, having that aperture like that gives a nice kind of focus, blur, depth of field kind of effect, which some people don't really like, but I like it a lot. I tend to like the look, and I think it improves things a little bit. Not that this forest was bad without it, but I just kind of like how it creates this sort of feeling. I don't know what it is, but I like it. Anyway, this forest looks very nice. I'm very, very happy. Hopefully you had a lot of fun watching this, and maybe you learned something. Maybe this was helpful. I am sorry that there had to be so much editing, time-lapse, and cutting, but unfortunately our videos are very constrained at this point in our career. We can't make things that are massively long because we have storage problems and upload time problems and potato internet problems, all kinds of problems, but we do our best. And we'll get back to doing our best in the future as well, so keep an eye out for incoming videos. If you enjoy this, definitely like and subscribe, share with your friends or whatever. That helps us a lot. Subscription is free and easy. It's one of the best things you can do for us, outside of donating, but not everybody can do that. But if you do have the capability and the desire to donate to us, you can do that in the links that are going to be provided in the description. That's about all for now. The thing I would... Oh, one last thing I'd like to say. This scene is going to be remixable, so when this video, at time of release for this video, so you can go search this up on Dreams. Marty's going to put a thing in the description now. You can find it if you have Dreams and you want to remix this scene and mess around with it. All this stuff will be in here. The scene may end up getting updated in future with additional additions, basically, but yeah, it will be free and public to use, and you can use it in anything. I do not require citations if you want to use it in some game or something of your own, but citations are appreciated, but definitely not required. If we don't want people using our stuff freely, we won't make it remixable. That's basically our rule of thumb. So, enjoy this when it is available, and I'll see you sometime in the future, and I hope you had a good day. This has been Billy Cultist. Bye-bye.